When my daughter-in-law called me a nobody at my own sister's wedding dinner, I didn't say a word. I simply smiled, even though my heart felt like it had stopped beating for a moment. Around us, the lights of the banquet hall glittered over polished glass. Laughter echoed between tables, and waiters moved gracefully with trays of wine and desserts. But in that instant, every sound turned into a blur. Her words cut through the noise like a whisper that everyone somehow heard. I remember holding my water glass tightly, forcing my hands not to shake. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt the way people expect a mother to be. I was just ... silent. Because silence, I've learned, is heavier than words when spoken at the wrong time. She didn't mean it as a joke. Her tone carried that soft, casual cruelty people use when they want to prove something. And she did. She proved she no longer saw me as family, not even as someone worth respecting in front of others. That night, as I looked around the shining room full of laughter and pride, I realized something quietly painful. Sometimes love doesn't fade. It just gets covered by ego, layer by layer, until it can't breathe anymore. Asterisk, I was not born into a loud family. We were steady people who worked, saved, and kept our promises. My parents taught us to look after one another without fuss. I was the eldest, then my sister, Maria. We grew up in a small apartment where love was shown in meals on the table and in the way our father always came home when he said he would. I married young and had one child, my son Daniel. His father and I did not last, but we parted without bitterness. Life became a straight road of work, school runs, and quiet evenings. I learned how to keep a house warm with simple things and how to sleep even when worry sat in the corner. When Daniel grew tall and kind, I felt my heart rest a little. I told myself, he is my good work. When Maria fell in love later in life, I was happy for her. She had given so much of herself to our parents and to me. She waited for the right man and found one, a gentle accountant named Victor who listened more than he spoke. They chose to have a wedding dinner in the city, something modest but elegant, a gathering where people could talk without shouting over music. Maria wanted beauty without show. I just want a room full of grace, she told me. I said then, that is what we will create. Money is a quiet test of love. Maria wanted to manage it herself, but I could see the numbers pushing against her smile. One night she called, and her voice shook. The venue deposit had doubled because of a scheduling issue. The florist wanted payment earlier than agreed. I said, do not worry. I'll handle it. She refused at first. We argued like sisters do, soft and stubborn. In the end, I paid the deposit and part of the catering up front. I did it quietly, with my name on the signature line, and told the manager to keep it between us. I did not want gratitude to sit like a guest at our table. I wanted Maria to have a day without fear by then. Daniel had introduced us to Maya. She was bright, clever, and sure of herself. The first time she visited, she brought a cake and asked about my job. I liked her direct eyes. She and Daniel made sense together in that way young couples do when they believe the world will shape itself for them. I made tea. We spoke about simple things. When they got engaged, I hugged them and felt a small worry move through me like a cloud. It passed and left a clear sky. I thought it would stay that way. In the beginning, Maya and I were careful and kind. She showed me their apartment plans. She asked for my chicken soup recipe. I gave it with exact measures, even though I always cook by feeling. When she started a new role at work, we celebrated with takeout and paper cups because the dishes were still in boxes. She laughed and split a dumpling with me. If someone had taken a picture then, it would have shown to women who could share a life. But small misunderstandings grew like hairline cracks in glass. They were not loud or dramatic. They were slow and ordinary. Once, I called Daniel early on a Sunday. They had wanted to sleep in. Another time, I folded their laundry when I stopped by to drop off soup. You don't need to do that, Maya said. Her voice was calm but firm. I smiled and said, I know. I wanted to. After that, she kept the door locked, even when she knew I was on my way. It made sense, yet it stirred something I did not have words for. Then came trouble around the engagement party. A relative had made a comment about expenses. I brushed it off, but I saw Maya's jaw tighten. Later, she asked Daniel whether I had opinions about how they should spend their money. He told me this as if it were nothing, but I heard the small scrape of a chair moving back. I told him, I do not count your money. I count my blessings. You are one of them. He hugged me and said, I know, Mom. Still. A coolness entered the room and chose a seat. I also began to notice the way Maya looked at me when I spoke about Maria's wedding. It was a short look, but it tapped on the glass. It must be expensive, she said once, not as a question. I said, it will be fine. She nodded. That was all. I kept my promise to Maria and never said I had helped. I did not want family talk to turn into a list. On the day of the wedding dinner, the city looked freshly washed by a light afternoon shower. I took the bus and looked out the window without really seeing. I had my small handbag and a simple dress I had worn twice before. I do not buy clothes for occasions. I wear the clothes I have and bring my best behavior. At the venue, the staff smiled like they knew me, which made me uneasy. I nodded back and found my table number. Maria glowed in a calm way. Victor stood by her with gentle pride. Daniel and Maya arrived together, a beautiful pair. He kissed my cheek and said, "You look lovely, Mom." Maya smiled and moved to greet another guest. That was all right. A wedding draws people like a tide. Everyone moves in and out of reach. The dinner began, and small speeches floated up and faded. I listened and let their joy fill me. I thought about the years it took to reach this room. I thought about the late nights Maria and I spent caring for our mother when she was ill, the way we took turns so the other could sleep. I thought about all the little promises that had brought us to this table. I felt steady and grateful. I did not need to be seen. It was enough to witness my sister's happiness. Still, I sensed a watchful thing in the air. It was the feeling you get when a door is almost, but not quite, closed. A small draft slips through. It is not enough to make you cold, yet you know it is there. I took a sip of water and kept my smile soft. I told myself that love is a patient worker. It builds slowly, and it fixes quietly after the main course. Maya and I found ourselves near each other while guests shifted places for photos. She looked at me with a brightness I could not read. "Did you enjoy the food?" she asked. "Very much," I said. She nodded, and we stood in a silence that was not friendly. I thought of saying something easy, but I did not want to force peace like a door that sticks. I let the moment pass. I returned to my seat. When the dessert plates were set down and the room grew louder again, the manager came over to check on our table. He recognized me and gave a small, respectful nod. That was when I felt the shape of the night settle into place. The choice I had made to be quiet would be tested. Grace is easy when no one is looking. It is more difficult when the light turns toward you. I took a breath and folded my napkin across my lap. I remembered my father's lesson. Hold your dignity the way you hold a cup of tea steady, even when people bump into you. I did not know the exact words that would follow, or how they would land. I only knew who I wanted to be when they did. The night carried on like a slow-moving current, calm on the surface, but restless underneath. I watched people laugh, raise glasses, and take pictures that would later live on phones and frames. The hall shimmered with gold light, and I remember thinking how beautiful the world can look when hearts are peaceful. Mine was not. I could feel Maya's glances now and then, not sharp, but measured. She had a way of smiling without warmth, polite yet distant. Daniel, bless him, was floating from table to table, greeting relatives, his happiness genuine and simple. I often wondered how two people so close could live in such different seasons, one in spring, the other in winter. As the evening went on, Maria stood to make a small speech. Her voice trembled with joy and gratitude. "Tonight," she said, "is not just my celebration. It's a reminder of family, of love that waits and forgives. I thank everyone who helped make this possible." She looked toward me briefly and smiled, that quiet, knowing smile we shared as sisters. It warmed me. I bowed my head a little, not wanting attention, but that was the moment the air shifted. A cousin at our table asked, half curious, half proud, "Susan, you must have helped Maria a lot, right? You're always the one keeping the family steady." Before I could reply, Maya spoke, clear, confident, with a laugh that drew nearby eyes. "Oh, come on," she said lightly. "Mom doesn't really do much these days. She's retired, right? She's more of a quiet presence." It was said like a joke, but it wasn't one. The table went still for a second, that kind of silence that hums under laughter. My cousin looked at me, unsure whether to smile. Daniel turned to Maya, eyebrows slightly raised. She added, still smiling. You know I'm just teasing, right? I mean, everyone does their part. Her tone was playful, but her eyes, they held that glint people use when they want to draw a line, not cross it. I smiled back, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. Yes, dear, I said softly. I suppose I'm just the quiet kind. But inside, something folded over itself. I could hear my heart slow down, like it wanted to listen to what had just happened. Later, when the manager approached the table again, a simple routine check, he greeted me directly. Everything all right, Mrs. Susan? Thank you again for handling the balance earlier. Everything went smoothly. I nodded, but before I could respond, Maya blinked. Balance, she asked. What balance? The manager smiled, unaware of the tension he'd walked into. The final payment for tonight's arrangements. Mrs. Susan signed the invoice last week. There it was, quiet truth, standing in a room full of noise. Maya's expression froze, confusion flickering across her face like a candle in wind. Daniel looked at me, startled. Mom, you paid for this, he asked softly. I shook my head gently. It wasn't about payment, Daniel. It was about love. Your aunt wanted a night of peace. I just helped her get it. The table was silent again, the kind of silence that isn't empty, it's full of realization. Maya's cheeks flushed pink. She looked away, pretending to sip her drink. The sparkle in her eyes earlier had dimmed, replaced by something softer. Shame, maybe, or the first stirrings of understanding. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The rest of the evening went on like a film. After the ending, people moving, talking, unaware that something important had already happened. When it was time to leave, Maria hugged me tight. You're my anchor, she whispered. You always have been. I smiled, my throat tight. Just be happy. That's all I ever wanted. Daniel walked beside me to the car park, quiet and thoughtful. Mom, he said finally, I didn't know you covered the wedding. You should have told us. I looked at him and smiled. Some kindness doesn't need to be known, son. It just needs to be done. He nodded slowly. Maya shouldn't have said that. You know? I know, I said, but she's young. Sometimes people speak before they understand. That night, as I rode home alone in a cab, the city lights looked softer, almost forgiving. I thought about how love often hides behind hurt, and how forgiveness isn't weakness. It's a quiet kind of strength. I looked out the window and whispered to myself, let it go, Susan. You did what love would do. The next morning, sunlight slipped through my curtains like a quiet visitor. I woke early, as I always do, and sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city was already alive. Horns, footsteps, and a soft wind that carried the scent of bread from the bakery below. Everything looked the same, but inside me something had changed. It wasn't pride. It wasn't anger. It was stillness, the kind that comes when a storm has passed, and all that remains is the soft echo of rain. I thought about the night before, about Maya's words, about the silence that followed. I could still see the expression on her face when she realized what had happened, when she understood that the woman she had dismissed as a nobody had quietly carried the weight of that evening on her shoulders. But I also remembered my own reaction. Polite, gentle. I had chosen silence not to appear strong, but because I knew that nothing good ever grows from shouting. My mother used to say, grace is what keeps a wound from becoming a scar. Around mid-morning, Daniel called. His voice was soft, careful. Mom, can we come by later? Just to talk. Of course, I said. I'll make tea. By noon, the bell rang. Daniel stood at the door, holding flowers, his shoulders slightly tense. Behind him, Maya looked smaller than usual. No makeup, no confidence in her posture. Just a young woman who didn't quite know where to place her hands. Come in, I said quietly. They stepped inside, and the air filled with that uneasy calm that always follows an apology waiting to happen. I poured tea into 3 cups and set them down gently. Maya spoke first. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she began, her voice trembling. I shouldn't have said what I said last night. It was wrong. I thought I was being funny, but it came out cruel. I didn't know you helped Maria like that. I didn't know. I stopped her with a small smile. Maya, you don't owe me anything. What matters is that you understand. Words spoken in haste can hurt, but forgiveness spoken calmly can heal. She blinked, surprised. You're not angry. I looked at her for a long moment. Anger is heavy, my dear. I've carried heavier things in life. I don't have room for it anymore. Daniel reached for my hand. Mom, I'm sorry too. I should have defended you. I should have said something. I shook my head. No, son. You did the right thing. Sometimes silence is kinder than defense. It gives people space to see themselves. Maya's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. I didn't mean to make you feel small. I don't know why I do that sometimes. Maybe I wanted to prove I belonged. Her honesty softened the air. I could see her, not as the woman who hurt me, but as the girl still learning how to love without fear. I said, You do belong, Maya. You always did. Family isn't about who speaks the loudest. It's about who stays when silence comes. She covered her face for a moment, then looked up and whispered, Thank you. We sat there for a long time. No speeches, no grand gestures. Just three people letting a broken moment mend itself, thread by thread. When they left, Maya hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that says more than words ever could. You're not nobody, she said softly. You're the kind of person I hope to become. That night, Daniel sent a picture of them at home, smiling again. Dinner next week, he texted. We'll cook for you, I replied. I'd like that. Days passed, and the story of that wedding dinner faded like perfume. Only the faintest trace remained. But something lasting had grown in its place. Maya began calling me often, asking small things about recipes or garden tips. Sometimes she just wanted to talk. One evening she said, I used to think respect was something people owed me because of who I was, but now I see it's something you earn, quietly, the way you do. I smiled at her words. It wasn't praise I wanted. It was peace, and peace at last had found its way home. A few weeks later, Maria invited all of us to her apartment for dinner. The moment I stepped in, the memory of that night came rushing back. The laughter, the lights, the sting, and then the calm. But this time, everything felt lighter. As we ate, Maria raised her glass and said to Susan for reminding us that grace is louder than pride. Maya clinked her glass gently against mine. To Susan, she echoed. I smiled and whispered, to family. The weeks that followed were quieter than usual, not in sound, but in spirit. Something gentle had settled around me, the way evening light settles on a street after rain. Life returned to its rhythm. I went back to my part-time work at the library, watered my plants, and took slow walks through the park near my building. The leaves were turning golden, and each time the wind passed through them, I felt like it carried away a little more of the heaviness I'd been holding. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't arrive like thunder. It slips in quietly, through small gestures, a message, a shared laugh, a thoughtful visit. Maya began to stop by on weekends, sometimes with Daniel, sometimes alone. She'd bring small things, a box of tea, a jar of honey, a scarf she thought would suit my calm colors, as she put it. At first, I wondered if it was guilt, but after a while, I saw it wasn't. It was care, the beginning of something fragile but real. One Saturday afternoon, as we sat together peeling apples for a pie, Maya said, You know, I used to think love was shown by winning arguments, by being right. But that night at the wedding, I saw you lose and still win. I smiled. Sometimes winning isn't about being right. It's about being kind. She nodded. I'm still learning that. I looked at her hands, steady now, working without rush, and felt a quiet pride. We all are, I said, even at my age. Daniel came in later, carrying groceries. You two seem busy, he teased. Maya laughed. I'm learning your mom's pie recipe. I think this is her way of making sure I don't just feed you takeout forever. Daniel kissed her cheek and said, Well then, teach her everything, Mom. I smiled, watching them. The two people I love most in the world, my son and the woman who had once hurt me, peeling apples with gentle fingers. That evening, as the pie baked, the scent filled the apartment. I remembered years ago when Daniel was small and would sit on the counter, swinging his legs as I cooked. Home smells like this, he'd said once. Now, it smelled like that again. Only this time, there were three of us. Later, when we sat down to eat, Maya said something I'll never forget. I used to think respect came from success, from money, position, status. But that night, when you didn't say a single cruel word back to me. I realized respect comes from peace, and peace isn't weakness. It's strength that doesn't need to shout. I looked at her, my heart softening further. Peace isn't given, I said. You have to choose it again and again, even when it's hard. She nodded, eyes glistening. Then I choose it too. We ate in silence for a while. Not awkward silence, but the kind that means something has finally healed. After they left, I stood by the window and looked at the city lights. I thought of that night in the banquet hall, the glittering glasses, the sting of humiliation, and the sudden calm that followed. I thought of how easy it would have been to lash out, to speak words that would only add fire to fire. But instead, I had chosen to stay still, and that stillness had become a seed. Now, months later, that seed had grown into a tree of understanding, quiet and strong. It had roots in grace and branches in love. A few days later, Maria called. "I still can't believe how you handled that night," she said. "I would have exploded." I laughed softly. "You might think that, but when the moment comes, you'd find your own calm." She sighed. "You've always been like that, calm under everything. It's your gift." "It's not a gift," I said. "It's practice. Life gives you many chances to lose your temper. You just learn not to take them." Maria chuckled. "I'll remember that." One evening, months after everything had faded from gossip and talk, Maya and Daniel invited me to dinner at their apartment. It was warm, simple, full of laughter. When I was about to leave, Maya handed me a small envelope. "Just a thank you," she said shyly. Inside was a handwritten note for teaching me that dignity doesn't need noise and love doesn't need credit. I read it twice, my eyes wet, but smiling. "Thank you," I whispered, as I walked home under the city lights. I realized something I wish I had known years ago, that sometimes life doesn't give us the respect we deserve right away. Sometimes it waits until we've proven, through silence and grace, that we were worthy all along. And when it finally comes, it comes gently. Like a late apology or a morning sun through old curtains.